Italian Cooking in association with Simply Good Food TV, where today we're going to make Pane Siciliano or Sicilian bread. Now before we get started, take a second, click that subscribe button in YouTube, and download the Simply Good Food TV app. This bread is made with semolina durum flour. This is not that double lot durum flour or semolina flour that's very, very powdery and white that you'll use to make like pizza dough and some pastas. This is the grainier, yellowish tinted flour. It's called semolina durum flour. It is very grainy. It can be hard to find. You might need to look on Amazon or a specialty store to find it, but I'll tell you what, it is definitely worth the effort. In addition to being a really tasty bread, I really felt that this was a lot of fun to make and kind of a break from what I've been doing lately. It's primarily because the bread is not the traditional round or oblong loaf. It's kind of an S shape. In Italy, the S shape is referred to as Occhi di Santa Lucia because it's meant to resemble the shape of eyeglasses and is an homage to Santa Lucia, who is the patron saint of vision. This bread is also sprinkled with sesame seeds before the final rise and after it's put into the S shape. So before you put it in the oven, it kind of looks like a big fat S shape, but it comes out golden brown, smells great, tastes better than it even looks. So I'm not going to waste any more of your time. Let's get started. Let's take a real quick look at the ingredients for our Pane Siciliano or Sicilian bread. What we have is 1 cup plus 1 tablespoon of unbleached all-purpose flour, and then we have 2.5 cups of semolina durum flour. Then we also have 1 tablespoon of olive oil, 1 teaspoon of malt powder, 2.5 teaspoons of salt, 1 1/4 cup of slightly warm water, and a pack of instant yeast. Now I've already got my water in my mixer with the yeast, which is pretty much ready. So let's talk about our malt powder. If you don't have malt powder, you can substitute an equal part of malt syrup. What this is actually Diastatic malt powder. You can buy it in small little packs. I found mine on Amazon because it's kind of hard to find. Do not get the flavored malt that you would use like in a beer. This is the unflavored Diastatic malt powder. What this does is it feeds the yeast, and it also helps the dough retain moisture, and it will improve the crust of the dough. You'll see this in quite a few Italian breads, and even French breads will use this as well. And it doesn't take much, so it's it's part of the chemistry of the bread. It helps feed that yeast. It's part of the living organism, really, that is bread. So what we want to do first, we want to make sure that our flours are mixed together. We don't really need to sift them. We're just going to kind of mix them together. And we're going to put the rest of our dry ingredients in as well. And then we will just kind of stir it around a little bit. So we'll get I'm going to use my Danish dough whisk. These things are magic. If you do not have a Danish dough whisk, anytime you're making brownies or cake or bread, it's amazing how well these things break up lumps. So I'm going to take my malt powder, 1 teaspoon, pour it over our flours, and this is 2.5 teaspoons of salt. And we're just going to kind of whisk this together. And while I'm whisking this together, I'm going to go ahead and put my 1 tablespoon of olive oil into my water and yeast mixture. And go ahead and let's lock this in. We're going to go ahead and turn this on. Give that just a second to get mixed together while I kind of continue to whisk this real quick. All right, so now we are going to slowly incorporate our flour mixture, our dry mix, into our wet mixture. Take our time. Try not to make too much of a mess, which I never quite succeed at. We're going to kind of let this come together with the paddle before we switch over to the dough hook. Now I am making actually 2 batches of this, so in between takes I'm going to kind of mix together my second batch. So when we get to the end of the video where we're kind of shaping this dough has an interesting shape, which you'll see at the end. But that way you'll see I have 2 batches there just because I want 2 batches. that has came together about as good as it's going to with the paddle. I want to get it off there. Now, one thing to keep in mind, anytime you use semolina durum flour, because it is a larger, kind of a larger grain of flour, it takes a little bit longer to absorb the moisture. Now that we got our dough hook on, we're going to let this knead on medium speed for about 4 to 5 minutes until the dough really comes together. So we'll start it on our low speed. And boy, that's looking a little bit dry. I'm gonna go ahead and put this on medium for just a second, and then I'm gonna check my dough. And that happens from time to time when you measure your flour by volume rather than by weight, because sometimes the flour gets packed, sometimes it's not. Now that is dry because we want this to be slightly sticky. I can feel a little bit of graininess in there as well, and that graininess is from the semolina flour, and that graininess will go away when you have enough moisture in there and then after it has been kneaded appropriately. So I'm going to spin around real quick. I'm going to grab some water. Now I'm not going to put all this water in. Start with like a tablespoon of water. If that's not enough, add more, because we don't want to have to go back and add more flour. And a little bit of flour or a little bit of water when you're making dough to correct it will go a long way. So I've got my water in there. We're going to see what happens. Start on slow. And we'll go up to medium. So my mixer has been going now for about 3 minutes. Our dough is ready. I'm going to lay down some flour real quick here because anytime you make dough, you want to finish with a hand knead, even if it's only for just a second or two, because you want to feel that dough. You want to make sure that it is all completely smooth. I can tell you that this dough is very, very smooth. Finish with a hand knead. You use the palm of your hand, push away, pull back, spin. Push away, pull back, spin. And I can tell you that dough feels pretty good. Feels pretty good. Might still be a tad dry, but I think it might be, yeah. My gut's telling me to add a little more water. So I'm gonna go ahead and add more water. You may not need to. Then what we're gonna do, we will put it in a bowl, put a little bit of olive oil in your bowl, make sure it's all well-oiled bowl. This will go in the bowl, cover it with plastic for 1.5 hours for the first rise. Then we'll be back. So our Pane Siciliano is done with its first rise. You can see it is pretty much doubled in size, which is exactly what we want to see. So what we're going to do with this bread is I'm going to sprinkle some flour, just a little bit. We're going to turn this out, if it'll cooperate, and then we will just punch it down. Just give it some love taps, just like that. Now we're going to wait 5 minutes to kind of let it rest. So our dough is sat for 5 minutes. What we want to do is we want to kind of shape it into a rectangular shape. And then we're going to roll it. Now this is the first time I've ever made this bread. Okay, I've got my dough shaped. This is this is about 30 inches in length. So what I want to do is cut it in half. Once I've got it cut in half like so, then we're going to shape it into the traditional Pane Siciliano. So before I do that, I'm going to get this just a little bit thinner. I've got it just a wee bit too thick. And I'm going to get it thinner by kind of stretching it a little bit and then rolling it to try to keep it round rather than square. Now that I have this dough shaped a little bit better, we're going to put it into the traditional Pane Siciliano shape. And the way we do that is it's kind of like an S, or like the note sign if you're a musician. We're going to kind of roll this side in this way and this side in this way until we bring it together like this. And then what we'll do is place this on some parchment paper. Now I am going to put a little bit of flour down on my parchment paper here, just so this dough won't stick. This isn't a very sticky dough, but once I put my my damp cloth on this, it might get a little bit sticky. So there's one. I'm gonna go ahead and prepare this dough by getting it a little bit thinner and longer as well. I have my second piece of dough ready to shape. A little bit thicker on this side than I want it to be, but that's all right. Again, we're gonna go and we're gonna twirl in this side and twirl the opposite way with the other end and meet just about in the middle. That is the traditional shape. We're not quite done yet. I almost forgot the last step. The last step is to brush these loaves with a little bit of water. We want to get them sticky is our goal. Now, since I kind of had these rolled around in flour a little bit, it's taken a little bit extra water to kind of get through the flour and make that dough sticky like we want it. The reason we're doing this is we're going to sprinkle on some sesame seeds. This dough traditionally has sesame seeds on it. You don't have to put the sesame seeds on, of course. You know, if you're making this at home, you can do it however you want. But there we go. That water will make it just sticky enough so when we sprinkle on our sesame seeds that they'll kind of hold. Now, we'll go ahead and put these on both. Now to let these rise, I'm going to take a tea towel, get it damp with hot water, lay it over this. I will every now and then reheat the tea towel just so I know that this is staying nice and warm. We're gonna let this rise for an hour and a half, then we'll be back. It has been an hour and a half and our Sicilian bread or Pane Siciliano is ready to put in the oven. Oh my gosh, look at those beautiful loaves. They've risen, they're poofy. Now you will see on the one here, I put some Moldovan salt flakes rather than the sesame seeds just to be different. So these loaves of bread will go in the oven at 425 degrees. You'll see there is a quarter-size sheet pan underneath my stone. Once I put the loaves in the oven, I'll pour some water into that pan. It's going to make some steam. I'll quickly close the oven. That steam will kind of set the crust. Now, 5 minutes in, I will open the stove, pour in a little bit more water, create more steam, and then I will, after 10 minutes, lower the oven down to 400 degrees. Once we lower that temperature, we're going to let that bake for another 25 to 30 minutes. We'll keep an eye on it so these loaves don't burn. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and get these in the oven. When they're ready to take out, we'll be back. The bread's ready to come out of the oven. Just checked it. Let me grab my pizza peel and I'll get those loaves out so we can take a look at them. These loaves turned out absolutely beautiful. Got a nice color on them. Oh my gosh. One more. This last loaf here, I did a Moldovan salt flake on it rather than the sesame seed, so it looks a little different. That oven closed. Let's get the, see the parchment paper just pulls right out. It doesn't even stick to it. These are really hot, so we're gonna let these cool just enough, and then we're gonna be back and we'll taste and see how this wonderful looking bread turned out. So our Pane Siciliano, or Sicilian bread, has cooled. You can see, I just think this is just such a, visually appealing bread. So let's find out if it tastes as good as it looks. So as I always do when I make bread, I don't eat the heel. I cut plus one, a little bit of butter, because you have to. And let's give this a try. Oh my.
It's good.
I love the semolina durum flour. The semolina durum flour has such a unique taste. Kind of nutty, but just delicious, delicious. And this bread's perfect, perfect. So easy to make, really neat shape. It makes you look like you really know what you're doing, and it's so simple to do. Highly recommend it. And with that, thank you so much for watching POV Italian Cooking. Don't forget to follow us on all the major social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Google+. Most importantly, click that subscribe button in YouTube, and download that Simply Good Food TV app where you can see every episode of POV Italian Cooking as well as some great shows from other chefs. Thank you so much for watching, and ciao.